Okay, I'm going to start with some announcements, if I can find them. That's what happens when you have too many screens open. Here we go. So can you see a screen that says announcements?
Yes.
Okay. I don't want subtitles. Get out of here. Okay. We just had a board meeting and discussed the three kinds of meetings that we've been experimenting with since COVID. And so this is one of those Zoom meetings. We've had hybrid meetings and we've had lots of technical problems with the audio on those. And we used to have in-person meetings before COVID. It was interesting, our discussion, because some people really like Zoom only, in part because the visual is so good and it's convenient. Some people miss in-person only because of the personal connection that you get with that. So basically what we ended up with was deciding that we're going to experiment with a variety of these three formats and continue to get a sense from the membership what they prefer. Anyone who's not on the board who wants to chime in briefly on your preference about Zoom only versus in-person only. And if you don't want to talk now, you can email me or you can put something into the chat window.
David, this is
Yeah.
Diane. I prefer the Zoom meeting because I live in Minneapolis. So it's a lot easier for me to be there, especially, when bad weather is coming.
Sure.
And like everyone else said, I enjoy the meetings and it's convenient and timing is good. So I don't have to worry about driving all the way to Wisconsin, but I love the group. So
Yep.
It's good for me to keep in the group and still attend the meetings.
Yeah. Thanks, Diane, for your thoughts on that. Any others?
I'll add one thing there. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. I agree with Diane. It's so easy to do the Zoom meetings and very convenient. I miss our group gathering, and maybe it could be once every 3 months or something like that, but it certainly is convenient. And I go to Florida now in the winter, so being able to stay in touch via the Zoom is really nice. So
Yep.
So that's my thoughts.
Okay.
One note, I just joined late, and so I missed part of or most of the conversation probably. But I saw that there's a Zoom some kind of a webinar on making the technical issues of having hybrid meetings easier tomorrow at 11:30 a.m. And I can send that link to whoever would like it.
Send it to me, please.
I will.
This is Steve Placker.
Yep. Okay, I will do
Wonderful.
that. I prefer to meet once a month myself, and And I think all the rest of the meetings could be on strictly online, really. But anyhow, that's my 2 cents.
Okay, thanks, Dennis. I'm going to move on, just in the interest of time. Again, if there are any other thoughts, let me know in the chat or by email. In terms of the upcoming schedule for November, we've got John Penoyer on shooting birds in flight. That should be a really good one. On November 16th, we have Eric Gorbin. The title is Visualization and Photo Evaluation. What it takes to make engaging and interesting photographs. This doesn't sound all that sexy, but this was highly recommended by another photography club, so that's why I pursued getting this. So I think it's well worth looking at. Let's see, the other schedule, December 7 is the last Salon. Topic is, or the assignment is action. See the deadline there. I'm going to move on. You got an email recently from Jill about the scavenger hunt winners. I thought it was worth noting here as well. Really well done, Jill, on running that scavenger hunt and the contest.
Thank you, but I made extensive notes for the next time and the next person who's doing it.
Okay. This next thing is actually coming up this weekend, Saturday, October 8th. There's a photography event at the Fort Snelling State Park that's run. There's a Fort Snelling Photography Club. Sorry, this is getting to you relatively quite late. It ended up in my junk mail. You can still register. Some of their documentation says its registration is over, but that's not true. Let's see. So you need to register if you want to attend any of the sessions or if you want to get a free vehicle permit. It's free to do that. And these are the programs that they're going to have. What I'll do is I'll send out all of this information to this distro after this meeting, so you don't have to worry about writing it all down quickly. There is a photo competition for this event. The pictures have to be taken between 8 a.m. and 10 p.m. that day. And there are some categories, but again, you'll be able to see those details in the email that I send you. And then I just saw something about N4C Spring Convention is going to be in Indianola, Iowa, end of April next year. That's all I know. So there'll be more coming about that. Okay, I'm gonna
message
Get-
a film clip of them.
get out of this one. And we'll get on to the Salon. Give me a second. Okay, can you see, thanks to our judge?
Yes. A
What is
big
the-
thank you to our judge, Deanne Probst. She'll tell you about this photo when she does her own intro, but I wanted to tell you that Deanne says she's had a camera in her hand for as long as she can remember and still has photos of the Badlands that she shot on her Kodak Brownie. Her love for nature photography was revived several years ago and has become her passion. She joined the Minnesota Nature Photography Club in 2014 and served as club president for the 2018 to 19 seasons. Currently, she's the treasurer. Deanne was recognized with MNPC's Botany Image of the Year in 2019, and in the club's 2020 competition, she received first place in the wildlife category and second place in the botany category. In 2021's competition, she received first and second place awards in the general category. Her images received several acceptances and honorable mentions in the interclub competitions of the 14 Club Twin Cities Area Council of Camera Clubs. In 2022, that group recognized her work in the first place Image of the Year in the Digital Realistic category from among 211 entries, and an individual award in the Digital Altered Reality category. Deanne also received 2022 Wildlife Image of the Year from MNPC year-end competition in May 2022. She has completed the 9-hour judge training session organized by the TCA CCC judge leaders. Welcome and thank you, Deanne.
Thank you. So I have to tell you about this photo. I don't have many pictures of myself. This was atop a camel in Egypt this last February, March. And my daughter pointed out that I need to fix the picture because it looks like a can of snuff in my pants pocket. It's like, well, no, that's a lens cap. You know, who doesn't have a lens cap in a pocket somewhere that is obvious? So I may have to fix on that, but thank you for that nice introduction, Joe. So I said I was just going to take a moment or two prior to the judging here to kind of define what I look for, the criteria I use when judging clubs, following the kind of training that, pretty thorough training that we had with a number of top photographers. It was a multi-day 9-hour session. I look for overall composition, the balance of an image, you know, some use of rules that often are meant to be broken, but basics like the rule of thirds and other things that contribute to a real sound composition. I look for the use of light, the source, the direction of the light. Is it being used to shape the subject, or is the exposure good under hot daylight or soft morning light, just keeping light near the top? Is there a story or some interest? What is the photo saying? Is it something that intrigued you enough to want to capture it? Was there a special moment that you froze? Was there an interesting vantage point that you assumed just to mix things up, top down, bottom up? Or was, in the case of creative images, was there a complementary use of a creative technique or some type of color treatment or finish that strengthens the photo? And then last but not least is post-processing skills. To me, that is increasingly becoming about half of the equation. There are so many options and free tutorials and lessons available to help all of us improve our processing skills, that to be competitive in salons, the real basic skills, I believe, must be in place. Skills like sharpening, dust spot removal, noise reduction, light management, that really does add a level of finish and polish to an image that might elevate it above another photo in the salon, if you will, that doesn't reflect that kind of skill application. So that's really what I use when evaluating the photos. And just, Jill, I don't know if the club is aware that sort of in the scoring categories and your scoring system, you were looking for like 30 to 35% being the 8 and above, if I'm correct, to move it on to your year ends. So I had to make some tough calls to keep it within that range, but I did that. So if you'd like to proceed, like I said, I have mine in the order I evaluated them, so it might take me a split second just to locate the
Okay,
all right, it's on my screen.
we'll start with the 5s and we'll start with the assignment category. This is called New York Nights Fireworks.
Skimming down to that one. Yes. You know, this panorama of fireworks is an ambitious one, and I was struck to wonder how, you know, that was shot back when the World Trade Center was still in place. And that just kind of took me back for a moment, like, wow, remember what that skyline used to look like. In this case, I was not really quite sure what happened with the processing, which I mentioned just a moment ago, but it's hard to kind of reconcile the ultra sharpness of the fireworks with the blurry and kind of oddly colored cityscape. It's interesting to see the World Trade Center, as I mentioned. So I don't know if this could have been a slide that was scanned. I don't want to guess too much about that, but the result of however that was treated led to the real blurring of the details in the cityscape and the yielding of a green that is not reflecting the firework colors or a natural color. Next slide, please.
Okay, on to the sixes. We'll start with Chapel of the Holy Cross, Milky Way.
All right, this is an iconic Sedona landmark I had the pleasure to see for the first time a couple of years ago. It's definitely super bright among its shadowed neighboring cliffs. I feel like everything, the lighting in particular, is in a bit of an exaggerated mode in this image, kind of a very bright foreground that would not naturally be possible with night skies. While the Milky Way is very processed into a very long exposure to capture that many stars as opposed to just the Milky Way alone. But the highlights that appear on the cliff tops are not really natural unless it was light painted. It doesn't indicate to me that it is so. And the front of the rock on which the chapel sits is also unnaturally bright. There also are some dark halos around the building that result from perhaps the contrast or however the sky was used. So if you were to go back and reprocess that and try to lose some of those dark halos that you can see around the edge of the building and maybe reconcile the light in a more natural way. Next, please.
Next we have Emily Elise.
I thought this sounds a little odd given that the assignment was night, but I really, to be really honest, wasn't really quite sure if it was an outdoor performance at night or indoor with spotlights, given how dark, like a club setting that might be artificially lit with the neon or the lighting on the stands. So I really couldn't reconcile that this was exactly the assignment. To me, it didn't quite illustrate the night, but rather the physical prowess of the performer that could have been shot indoors anytime. So the inability to determine if this was an indoor daytime picture, a nighttime picture is what I gave it a 6.
Okay. Next we have Flammulated Owl.
Oh, the sweet owls. Nighttime shooting can be difficult in the best of circumstances, but also while trying not to disturb the wildlife while you're doing that. Like you can see the catch light may have been due to a flash or an off-camera light of some kind. I thought it's a 7 due to the lighting, which resulted in some color issues and loss of detail, perhaps due to a high ISO needed to capture it. It's nice to see owls like this in any setting, but however, the light here is not either sufficient to capture the bird at night, or if it was moonlight, there's nothing to really indicate that that was the case, given the shadows you can see of the stick on the bird itself. Next, please.
Next is Idaho Evening.
I was going to say, first I'll talk about blue hour. Moon photography also is very challenging. It's kind of hard to get it well exposed, and then the surroundings also well exposed, well for details. To me, this really seemed like more of a creative category image, given the color choice used all across. It's such a bright blue that is unnatural for the natural setting to me that the photo is captured in. It also has a fair amount of processing noise and halos and loss of detail on the moon, which usually has a glow. So whether it was a blended image or not, or that created the loss of detail, it did not strike me as much a night, although the moon is a night. The color set it in more of a creative category, in my view. Next, please.
Here's Pole Kitten.
Kind of the same comments as for the earlier image. I can't tell if it's an outdoor performance at night or if indoor with spotlights. With that background, it looked like an indoor stage setting that it is not determinate if it was shot at day or night. So to me, again, the physical prowess of the performer is remarkable, but it's not really sharp. If you look closely in it, that's the other main reason it was given this score. The crop is also very, very tight around the figure. And I believe the image could use some air on both sides, given the amount of energy being expended by the movement of the hair and the dancer's body. Next, please.
Here's Rush Hour.
Let me find that one here. Here we go. Very familiar cityscape view, perhaps shot before that bridge came down. It fills the frame very well, but again, the processing put it at a 6 for me. Some processing issues have caused some very noisy and kind of a smudged appearance, perhaps from over noise reduction. The color balance is not natural, and dark halos kind of surround all the edges of the buildings, which again is an artifact of processing issues. I suggest to revisit the crop a little bit. On the left side in particular, you can see a row of vertical lights on a building that is pulling my eye off to the left, where a quick clip of that row of vertical lights kind of brings you to that nice dark edge of the tower that would give a little bit better framing for the image. Next, please.
Here is Stone Barn.
Again, that whole nighttime image editing can be really tough, and it's really predicated on what kind of data was captured by your camera sensor. The length of the exposure can be really tricky. You don't want to go too long with stars, because then you don't end up with round lights, but rather white ovals, while you're also trying to get good contrast when there's light pollution nearby, which in this case, you can see sources of light on the horizon. That appears perhaps to be the case here, given the color of the sky. So I believe some overprocessing has led to some unnatural coloring, but more so the smudging and halos around the building and the horizon. So maybe a lighter hand, see if that works to your eye a little bit better, kind of revisit it and see if you can bring out a little bit more of the darkness in the sky and a little bit more reduction of artifacts in processing. Next, please.
Okay, moving on to the 7s, we'll start with Hollow Rock Night Sky.
A special Minnesota setting indeed. I gave it a 7 for several reasons. The main one being a recommendation to use a little bit greater contrast to reduce the muddy effect of the gray across the sky and the clouds and the water. There's sort of great loss of detail in the lake. If it was a long exposure, you'll get that nice smooth feeling, but there's really no detail that's showing on my screen. Looking closely at it, it was more of a mottled effect on the water, and in the clouds, you see some color banding of the color. The other thought I was going to say, it's really not necessarily a true silhouette, because you can see some detail on the island. But what else did I say here? The stars are little ovals, a bit more than circles, and that may clearly be due to the length of exposure time and a little bit more loss of detail given that longer exposure and a little blurred effect. Next, please.
Okay, here's Kathy.
Another interesting composition. I thought that it was really kind of different. I'm not sure if it was all in one shot or maybe a blend of the sky and then some lighting onto the boat. Doesn't really matter. But again, it's pretty tough to capture that much moon detail. You see sort of a semi eclipse to my eye when I zoomed in on that. Yet the very contrast with the bright sun glow kind of horizon, which isn't quite night. I feel like maybe there was a blending that may have happened that made it a little bit unnatural. I do like the sharpness and I like the wide angle on this. But I think that contrast between the sun on the horizon and the moon glow kind of posed some conflict for me. Next, please. Okay,
here's Lunar Eclipse.
Another really ambitious blended image showing that eclipse. I've never tried this technique. I think it's really, really interesting. And the photographer must be a very patient person. I gave it a 7 to perhaps inescapable artifacts that may have resulted from the processing done here. There are a lot of horizon. You can see the light blue halo along the horizon. The trees became very smudgy in that work, and the sky is quite a bit brighter at the top than naturally where it would be on the horizon. Excuse me, I think it would also be a bit longer image if some of the light from that parking lot was removed or you cropped off there so that the viewer's eye is strictly on that pattern of moon rising And you could balance it out with some loss of sky at the top as well. Excuse me. Next, please.
Here we have Night Over the Pumpkin Patch.
This one kind of grew on me as I looked at it more and more. The moon exposure is really lovely. I like the bands of, excuse me, I'm talking a lot, nicely framed by the trees. So it was a nice placement of the moon in the picture. The clouds are level, but the building and the field aren't. And that, of course, may not be the case given the shape of the land. But it comes down to sharpness. Nighttime photography is really tough to get sharp, especially if you're trying to focus in almost dark conditions. And unfortunately, nothing in this image really is sharp. Neither the foreground, the trees, the building, they're all a little bit on the soft side. So great intention here. I think it maybe a sharpening software might pop it a little bit more and take another run at it and see if you like it a little bit better. Next, please.
Here's Triangulum Galaxy.
I was going to say either that's a long lens or a telescope with a camera to get this spinning galaxy. And I was interested in the name. It's not Andromeda, so it must be way out there. It's a 7 for the nice contrast in the stars, which aren't too oval in the exposure. A little touch, but not too bad. So while it's really ambitious to capture this incredible distant wonder, the end result still is soft, unfortunately, and tough to get sharp. Only NASA would probably be able to amaze us with something with really tremendous details, but really interesting effort. Next, please.
Here's Wanigan.
Another very interesting
yes.
image. The sparkles are really, really clear lines in the sky and zigzagged in the water. I appreciate the eye that spotted this and the placement of the photographer to get that reflection complete. With the lightness that's got around the launch site and the illumination area in the clouds. It's a 7 due again to the artifacts in the editing of the sky, and the black and blue results really in the dark parts. It's very noisy and smudgy, particularly on the line of the trees. And it's a very tight crop on the right side. If there's any image to add to that a little bit, I think that would give it a little bit more balance. And I'm not quite sure it's level, just the way that the reflections are a little bit off, but water can alter that. But if you take a look in that cloud and the illuminated area above the trees, it's very, very muddy and almost some vertical banding that you can see from top to bottom in the blue and the black. So take another run at it, bring those darks down and see if you like better. Next, please.
Okay, on the 8th, I will also read the photographer's name. Here's Fishing at Night by Fred Savatka.
Again, inside, outside, that was a little bit of a question for me, if it was a daytime performance or a play, but I thought you said the story was the lead here a bit, and the timing and the setting of the picture are very clear because you can see what's happening because the props on the set tell me that. It's very good color balance, the sharpness and needed details, I think, are well presented. It's an 8, given the hard crop to the left, that kind of chopped off that sign a little bit. If it were at all possible to add the left side of that, not cut the T and taxidermy off, you might get a sense that you're sitting in the audience and looking right at the stage where this was shot. Next, please.
Here is Fresh Hot Pizza by J. Olson Goody.
I thought this was a really, it's fun when let's see what is here. The fun issue when the wide angles begin to converge as they rise to make kind of a nice balance. I like the wide angle on this and the sharpness throughout. The left side brings you up into the shot. The right side angle brings you right up, and the two Mama Lisa's in front of the pieces. I just thought it was a nice, colorful image. Everything is sharp in this blue hour. It's not easy when it's a long exposure to get that sweet spin effect. I might have titled it Cold Drinks though, because that's the first sign I see, but I like Fresh Hot Pizza too. So congrats, this is a fun picture. Next, please.
Here's Lowry by Janice Kroll.
A nice image of the Lowry Bridge that, changes colors based on occasions. So maybe this was Valentine's Day, I don't know. I like the energy of the wide angle that was used here and the use of the pure black for mood, for contrast, eye management, and ability of the light areas to assume the shapes, because you really just follow that curved line from the base of the bridge all the way to the end. My only suggestion here is to maybe revisit the amount of the black at the bottom It's a little on the heavy side and kind of overweights the top third of the picture where the action is. You know, when there's not a white frame line around a picture, you kind of, it's hard to tell here, except all that black line at the bottom where it ends. So there's quite maybe a quarter of the picture almost is just black nothingness at the bottom. Try cropping that up a little bit for a better balance, and it's a really nice picture. Next, please.
Here's Minneapolis Sa Bridge.
I gotta find that one here. There we go. It's not an unusual setting on the Stone Arch Bridge, of course, but it's a nicely captured image of it and the lights of the city in the background, because only the lights of the buildings are exposed. So you've got a lot of black, so that you don't see any outlines hardly, except for what the lights render those shapes to be, unless, you know, the illumination defines them for you. So while the pure black sky is rather heavy, I gave it an A because it's well exposed and it's sharp. But I suggest revisiting all that roadway space at the bottom. So is it a bridge picture? Is it a cityscape? If you take a little bit of the bridge off the bottom and lead part of it, then it leads you right down those leading lines to the city lights and colors. So nice sharp image. Next, please.
I should have mentioned that image was also from Janice Kroll. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Here is Tracks by Chap Aiken. Tracks.
And fine, there we go. Hello, Red Wing. Lovely winter shot showing somewhat converging kind of human and train, and even the planting lines and the curb lines at that train station in the city. And it's named Tracks, but I thought the star of the image to me was the clock, because it's the brightest thing in the picture. And unfortunately, it's a little bit overexposed, but when our eye goes to the bright spots, that's where I hit first and kind of lost my focus on the converging lines. And the tracks kind of became secondary. And I always look at the title of a picture to say, what is it you want to emphasize? Why did you pick that shot? An exposure blend could maybe address that bright clock face, unless all the details are lost, but not sure if the sky, there's a little bit of noise in the clouds and in the sky, but I thought it was a nice image. It's just kind of decide if it's the building or the light or the tracks that are the focus. Next, please.
Okay, moving on to the 9s, we have Nighttime Condo Reflections by Mick Richards.
There we go. I thought that was a super eye-catching image to add super emphasis to the apartment and balcony lighting. It's a real powerful use of color and blacks at night to engage the viewer. It's a really nice eye to have seen that, and super crisp, super sharp. I wondered, it's not a 10 in this case. It might have been due to the angle of the building. I assume it was intentional to not level the building, but instead the reflection is more level, but the building is crooked. So for me, that docks it a point a bit. So I thought a really creative image, great use of exposure and color to get that brightness, but buildings are level, water reflections are not always, and for that reason, it's a 9. Looking back at that, just I can see the left line is straight there, but maybe using the transform tool or something to align all the buildings up at the top, you can see how they lean to the right just a bit. Next, please.
Okay, now the 10s. We'll have Nectar Bat by Marianne Dierks.
I thought, wow, to capture this beautiful little creature and all of its wonderful, intricate details, maybe using some kind of triggered strobe, perhaps, was really something special. The solid black background really contrasts well with this little mammal and showcases the shape's composition. You've got a nice rule of odds here, how the bat is complemented in shape by the petals or the blooms of this plant. The light doesn't do much for the bloom, however, because the gray highlights aren't particularly special, but it does make a nice odd grouping with the wings, and they certainly complement each other. So I've never seen a bat detail quite like this, and I really like this image very much. Next, please.
Moving on to the creative category, we'll start with the 6s. And here is Windmill number 10.
Thought this was an interesting combination of editing treatments and blending modes. maybe the bloody modes, maybe it was, I've seen this kind of similar treatment, and it was interesting with all those shapes and angles on that picture. It's a 6, not so much for each element, but the overall kind of look and feel. It's very, very busy, made even busier with the treatments, not only the colors and the lines, but the patterns and within it, which may have been very intentional. But it's kind of not easy to stay with the picture. It's so busy, I'm not quite sure where to look, because it's got kind of an equal treatment across the board. It's a lot of eye movement around, and I'm not sure where to settle and what to see, but it's really fun to play with these kinds of tools. It's a little tight on the crop as well, but a nice execution, but just a little bit busy to know where I'm supposed to look. Next, please.
Okay, starting with the 7s now, we'll start with Juvie Great Gray.
Let me skim down to that one here. Oh, I skimmed right past it. Sorry about that. I've got it right on my list here. There we go. I thought this is a really nice portrait of a beautiful creature with such direct eye contact. The lucky photographer to get that. I'm familiar with this painting effect, and it's used with care throughout the image, except not on the facial features of the owl. So while that's intentional, I find that contrast kind of disconcerting. Like, why is that different? I have more questions than answers when I look at the contrast between that sharp eye movement and then the rest of the image is given this treatment. So it kind of breaks it up. So I find it breaks the image flow for me. It is well balanced in color and the composition and the crops. So it will be moved on. No, maybe not moved on at a 7, but I would say pick one style and kind of stay with it, or at least ease off a bit on the high contrast between the sharp and the treatment. Next, please.
Okay, here we have Morning Flight.
Here we go. Nice banner shape of 3 swans in flight. They're all fairly uniform position, which is not always an easy thing to get. It could have almost been in your odds category I think you had last month. It's a nice consistency in the horizontal angle of the paint strokes and the position of the swans. That's a very pleasant image, but given the mix in this category of creative, in terms of composition or inspiration, it wasn't quite up to the levels of some of the other images, so it has a 7. Next, please.
Okay, here we have Shorebirds in Flight.
I really like the idea of this too. You've captured a scene that's usually very fleeting. We don't always get to see that fast motion when these soar by us. It also seems like it could be in the nature category, but it's a 7 due to the lack of sharpness in the birds. And there are some artifacts around their profiles in places. I do like the crop very much. It fits the picture. It's a nice balance between the water and the birds and the space above the birds. But due to sharpness and some artifacts, it is a 7. Next, please.
Here is Windmill number 5.
Yeah, another interesting creative treatment. Similar comments as for the previous windmill. The treatment here is not easy on the eye, and I assume that's very intentional, but it uses several different treatments, I believe, to could be inverting, could be color bands, it could be a treatment. It might have included a little bit more vertical to, let's see, we've got the 2 windmills here, hand. It more vertical to balance the wheel a little bit. It's, oh, the other one, it's not, oh, pardon me, I just skipped, my thing just slid by. So it's not an easy on the eye kind of image, which was likely intended, but it's kind of hard to stay with. That yellow is very hot and it's contrast with the yellow below that, which is also very hot. So I'm not quite sure where to put my eye. It's not a comforting picture on which I can rest. I look at it and go like, whoa, I can't stay with it very long, but it's an interesting creative treatment of the structure. Next, please.
Here is Windmill number 7.
Yep, same kind of comments as the previous. Fewer components here, but the treatment is rather, I don't want to say jarring a little bit, but it's again kind of harder on the eye given the sharp blacks and the bright yellows. I thought it might have included a little bit more of the vertical stem to this structure to balance out the wheel, because it sits a little bit low in the frame. So it again is not intended to be a smooth, silky, restful kind of image, but I thought by placing it full center like that, but nothing of the stem below to show the supports, I think it would benefit from a little bit more of the post down below. Next, please.
And windmill number 9.
9. This one's a little bit more eye-pleasing, if you will, because of the palette, at least to me, a little bit softer and calmer approach. Again, I think I'm familiar with that software, and it's so fun to play with. The colors are really harmonious. They're bright, they're fun in this rural image, kind of unexpected. I gave it a 7 due to the cropping choice. I think it's very tight on both sides, and a bit of space at the bottom and side would be a little bit more framing, if you will, to this. Give it a little bit more space to air up and let that colorful windmill in the center sing a little bit more. Next, please.
Okay, on to the 8s. We'll start with Boots and Spurs by Linda Donaldson.
I thought this was a really interesting subject and composition. It's not sharp in some places, but that tends to be around the outside edge, and that's okay. It's sharp where I think it needs to be. The boot leather, the detail of the spur right in that center area is pretty good. I like how the elements all work together. The colors are really complementary. The white frame kind of makes it, you're telling the viewer where you want them to look. So the outside part is like nice to have, but not essential. And I thought it was an interesting subject and well exposed, and I gave it an 8. Next, please.
Here is Napping in the Flowers by Melissa Anderson.
I thought, what a find if this really was the environment in which you captured the image. Oh my, I mean, either way, it's a very interesting setting, the composition. I think it's really well balanced in the frame, and the juxtaposition of gentle, soft flowers and the hulking sweet bear, complete with a little bit of stem or something in its mouth there, was just a really sweet picture. The painted treatment is good where detail is needed and not where it's not. So interesting image and very nice. Next, please.
Here we have Wren with Spider by Don Specht.
Spider, is it a spider and cotton candy? I wasn't quite sure what that was. I mean, with the painting treatment, it kind of blurs any detail. It's a very sweet image of a bird with a meal. The color is great. The treatment brings out the horizontal feathers on the bird and the vertical lines of the tree. I like the perpendicular elements of the composition. The eye is directed to the payoff of the food. The treatment kind of blurs whatever the white material is and takes my eye off the spider, and perhaps maybe reduce or mask off some of that detail on the white to kind of better identify what that is. But it's a really sweet image, but my eye is going right to that white thing at the end, and I'm saying, well, gee, what is that? Then secondarily, I'm going to the bird, but really nice composition. Next, please.
On to the 9s now. We'll have Sailing on Lake Garda.
I thought this is an image I moved around and around in really well. The simplicity to me stands out first. The creative treatment is kind of second. So I'm not focusing on, oh, look at that shading of blue. I'm looking at, oh, look at that elegant, kind of simple image. The choice of the cool colors, that soft peach sky, and the grain and the gradated hills behind, I thought contrasts really well with the lone boat, which is a little bit more realistically covered and maybe a little over sharp there, given the softness of the surroundings. But I thought it was a nice, sharpened contrast to the surroundings, and it's just a lovely, elegant image. Next, please.
And finally, the 10s. We have Iris Beauty by Betty Bryan.
I thought this works beautifully on several levels. The composition, the balance in the frame and the space around the flower is really very well, easy on the eye. The color, the harmonious colors, the creative treatment, perhaps a little bit, I can't quite tell what it is, nor do I have to see what it is, but there's something about it that has a little bit extra magic to it. It's well balanced, like I said, in the frame. The light is super gentle on all the elements. The shadows are just soft enough to add some dimension. So it's not flat. It's got a lot of nice 3D feel to it. And this dappled soft background is a really sweet setting. But whatever was done, it was done judiciously to amplify the natural color streaks and the detail in those in the bloom. I thought it's a lovely image. Next, please.
Excellent. I just want to go back. I missed another name. Chap Aiken did the Sailing on Lake Garda.
Ah.
That one. Sorry about that, Chap. Okay. Now we're going to go forward to the nature category.
Okay.
And we'll start with the sixes because there are no fives. I left that slide in by accident. And here we are with Butterfly Michael Phelps stroke.
I thought nature's colors are really on display in this close-up. It's a 7 for me due to the main subject. The quite large wing, when you're moving from left to right image, is the first thing you see. And of course, it's blurry. It's definitely got Michael Phelps's butterfly technique, but it's very, very blurry in the front there, which then contrasts with what appears to be an extremely sharp flower it's connected to, which then amplifies the softness and the sharpness quite a bit. The overall crop is a little bit tight as well. I give it a little bit more air on the side, but I think it's a nice concept. I love butterflies in motion. In this case, it's just too soft in the body of the butterfly and the wing for it to be higher. Next, please.
Downstroke.
Downstroke. Let's find this one here. Here we go. Again, so much beauty in flying birds like herons and egrets like this one. They're just so graceful and elegant to me. One of my favorite birds ever. The nice action image here with the wings definitely in the downstroke position, so it's well named. It's also nicely cropped. I gave it a 7 due to processing issues with the blur and maybe some over noise reduction. There's some smudging look that kind of comes from that. If that was done, that really remove any detail or the result of trying to highlight it. So it's kind of harsh, bright light that day, which is nicely dealt with. You've got detail in the wings, but unfortunately the bird is not sharp. Next, please.
Moving on to the 7. I'm sorry, this is still in the 6s. Lake Michigan Breakwall Sunset.
There we go. A great concept for the image, backlit waves and caught, in form midair. It is a 6 due to the slanting horizon, the water line there, as I mentioned in my criteria at first, water, and whether it's nature, image, or whatever category, unless it's really that what they call the Dutch effect or something like that. Unfortunately, this one is not level. And it also has a lot of artifacts in the sky, kind of overall noise, and the waves themselves are quite blurry, but nice concept. Next, please.
Okay, now we will move on to the 7s, and we will start with Apostle Island Sunset.
Very peaceful image at a lovely place. Love the wide banner kind of pano treatment to this. The guidelines for this category say that human elements shall not be present except on the rare occasion where the human elements enhance the nature story. So the boat to me wasn't a strong enough element to override that guideline, in large part because the bright blue of its color is inconsistent with the warm apricot pink colors from the light source, which is on the other side of the boat, or appears to be on the other side of the boat, given the shadow from the mast and the lighting of the clouds. The light appears to be coming from the right side, but yet the boat is quite brightly illuminated from the opposite side. So next image, please.
Blue stem at daybreak.
Lovely light. That's what caught me first on this image. Nice, soft light on these blue stem seeds. They're just nice and sharp against the very milky background. I believe it would be a stronger image if the lower portion of blur was removed to keep our eye on what is sharp, and that's the star of the shot, the purple seeds there. So there, in my view, there's a fair amount of extraneous blur and surrounding space that takes my eye off and away, especially given those vertical lines. My eye is going down and going up and away versus staying in the center. So I think a little judicious cropping there would make this a stronger image. Next, please.
Chipmunk nest building.
Adorable little chipper here, a mouthful of something he or she needs. I like the crop that keeps his face right smack in the middle, and the tail filling in on one side kind of keeps that from being too stark in the middle. I gave it a 7 due to what appears to me to be some really severe, when you look at it close and on the screen, there's quite a bit of perhaps over sharpening on the face of the critter, which as a point of attention really needs to be clean and clear. So I don't know how it looks on the Zoom, but I know on my screen it was a lot of little artifacts from some very, very severe sharpening of the center portion of the face. Next, please.
Okay, here's great blue heron.
Lovely blue heron in flight, neck is tightly in. Like I said, it's one of my favorite birds. Nice detail in the bird, but it's a 7 again due to processing issues that really reduce the overall quality. Your guidelines said no manipulation or modification permitted except resizing, and so whatever's been done to the water via the masking of the bird has led to some artifacts all around the bird's edges. So particularly you can see it here perhaps around the feet. There's some kind of smudgy edging there that might be a refining edge process or something like that. But unfortunately that process resulted in some unfortunate edging. So a little reprocessing might clean that right up. Next, please.
Stripes, stripes, and more stripes.
Love the title. Love the movement of the busy pattern zebras all eating together. I especially like the tall crop because that suits the image. It's not necessarily a picture frame. It's what the image calls for. I gave it a 7 due to what I see as some color issues. There's a lot of excess yellow stemming, kind of highlighting in the ear hair, and the grass is very bright Kelly green, and then blown out in some places. There's no detail. Also, if the space is there, I would add more at the bottom. His nuzzle is jammed up against the bottom crop, which then takes the detail away, and all you really see there is that piece of grass growing up. So if there is some more space in your original image, I would add more in the grass, and then try pulling those intense colors, saturated colors down to a little bit more natural look, and I think you'll have a better picture. Next, please.
Here we have the whole rainforest.
Pretty setting, love the piece, love to be standing right there looking at all of this. And I think that's kind of the question, is that there's a lot there. So it's a very multi-layered image that at first seems very peaceful, but then it really reveals like 6 straight different layers competing for the eye. So there's really no leading lines here. You've got the water in the foreground, the rocky beach, the first row of shrubs, then the trees, then the pines, then the fog, then the mountain, and then the clouds, and then the sky. So it's kind of a straight on look, but I thought the green is competing with the other light layers of the sky in the foreground that maybe don't add so much to the scene. So I would recommend, for a stronger image, pick a scene with fewer layers and without as many bright spots, so that it gets you more into what it is you're trying to say here, versus so many different evenly layered images that are all kind of competing with one another for your eye. Next, please.
Here is Wilson's warbler.
Oh, I thought, what a cutie. Either coming in for a landing or prepping to take off. I really like the environmental element in nature photos that set the stage for the subject. In this case, the pines are all kind of an even stage, but they're keeping me a bit away from the bird. The highlights on the needles are really bright, so that my eye is going there to the white spots in the foreground rather than so much to the bird. And that's really what I want to see pop. And I wasn't sure either, but as I kind of went up close on it, there was maybe some processing issues around the bird's head. Kind of the space between the eyes, it looked rather smudgy or solid yellow. There's no detail on that yellow. So I pull in a little bit tighter so I'm not competing with all that brightness of the pines, and give me a little bit more bird because he's so dang cute. Next, please.
Young oak leaves.
This is another one. At first I was like, wow, I love the light. I love the soft focus. I'm kind of a sucker for those features. Very harmonious colors. It really hints at the seasonal change we're looking at now. I think I would have had a higher score if the largest leaf in the foreground was sharp and surrounded by the softer elements. Because really the sharpest elements here are the stems and just portions of the smaller leaves, where the main one that's right smack in the center there of the odd number, so places that middle leaf kind of right in your line of sight, is soft, where the stem that doesn't offer any details or interest, those are sharp. So I love the concept and the exposure. I would just see if there's something that's another version of it that's got more sharp leaves for the detail that you wish to highlight with the crop you've presented, and see if that works a little bit better. Next, please.
Okay, moving on to the 8th. We will start with Catching Snowflakes by Don Specht.
I thought, brr, we're going to see this chilly sight too soon. It's a nice capture of a white-tailed buck, pink tongue out, maybe doing what the title says, all in its natural setting. Nice fast shutter to catch the snowflakes. They're not blurred. They're just really nice and frozen. My only concern, and gave it an 8 because the rather indistinguishable eye, it's really hard to make out the details in the eye. I'm not sure if it's partially closed. It's kind of black with a little bit brown there. I couldn't quite make out the details. And there is some softness around the head, the neck, and the ears. So maybe some selective sharpening might improve that and really give us a great look at this beautiful animal. Next, please.
Here we have End of Summer Dragonfly by Carl Wagoner.
A sweet high detail shot of the dragonfly on a sharp perch and what might be rather hot light, judging by the shadow that's there. Nice clean background, nice detail through the insect and the wings. Which is why, to keep our focus on that detail, I would recommend propping away a lot of the blurry branch, particularly that one in the bottom right corner. It's not adding anything to your picture. You've got plenty of space around the dragonfly to get rid of that because it's all blurry and soft there. And the empty space at the top and bottom is also kind of not serving a purpose. It's not so much framing because there's so much of it, of the piece. So maybe, like I said, crop a little bit more at the top and the bottom and get rid of that blurry leaf in the bottom right corner, and it would sing even more. Next, please.
Moving into the 9s now, we'll start with Behave, Boys.
Oh,
This is by Melissa Anderson.
I thought that, a sweet photo of a mom and frolicking twins. Oh, frolicking just was the word that stuck in the grass. Love that mom's feet are off the ground. There's a great story here. I mean, this is capturing that moment that I referenced before that you just don't see every day. I wasn't quite sure of the grass color at the site, not having been there. It looked a little bit bright. And I don't know if that was from lightening the exposure on the full image to get detail in the bears, or if that's just kind of what it was. But it's there's great detail and throughout, great cropping, sweet story. I sure hope I see this scene myself someday. So cute picture. Next, please.
Here's Hummingbird Nectaring by Diane Herman.
Here we go. Lovely male juvenile, I think, with that little spotting there. Perhaps a ruby throat nectaring on a salvia. Detail is good where it should be, around the head and the body. Even with a touch of the side light that you can see there, it hasn't lost details. It's not blown out on that body part. It's a little bit soft on the tail, but that's not where we're looking. The action is in the hummingbird's face, which maybe could be lightened up a little bit more, but it is staying true to the light source that I mentioned before. I like the shutter speed myself that shows wing movement, and it's not frozen in midair. It is keeping aloft and having dinner. The only suggestion I would make for a little bit better balance might be to take a little bit off that left side. There's quite a bit of yellow and green there that's not needed for balance. I think the bird and the salvia stems on the right side are enough for that. So pair a little bit off the left there, but it's a nice image. Next, please.
Say your story from Don Speck.
Again, the guideline appears here that where the storytelling value of a photo must be weighed against the pictorial quality. I love the story here and the well-timed action. I mean, he's got that other bird's feet right in his beak. So that it's well exposed light. It's got action, it's the kind of a focal slice to capture it. There is a little bit of blurriness in the features of the birds. Maybe the noise was reduced a bit that caused that, but the guidelines, then the story overweighs a bit of that kind of loss of detail, just a hair. It's a great picture to enjoy, and you're a lucky guy to catch it. Next, please.
On to the 10s now. First, we have Roll Cloud by Steve Placker.
I thought, wow, on this shot for several reasons. First, it's a great and unusual subject one doesn't find every day, thank goodness. But so while there are some kind of dark shadows in it, in most cases, that's really the nature of this phenomenon, given the light source is on the upper left. So it's illuminating what that situation looks like. And there's enough, not a lot, but there's enough detail in the bottom portion of the photo to define kind of the size and the space. You know, without that row of trees and the lake there and being able to see the ripples on the water, it would be hard to gauge the scale of this roll cloud. So I think it's really nicely balanced in the frame, and there's enough detail on the top left quadrant to justify there being that much there. Plus, that's really the angle of the clouds. So what a sight to see. And the light rays just punctuate it one more time. So nice job. Next, please.
And finally, Sharptail in Flight by Betty Bryan.
Lovely, warmly lit sharp-tailed grouse in the action image. Bird details are very sharp, and that's what matters with a bird with this much detail, even in that nice soft light. And this, as I kind of mentioned before about having blur, to me that shows movement, and the bird is either coming in or going down, but it's not just locked in the air. The sweet buttery background really is perfect for the detailed contrast in the bird. The only suggestion I would have is to maybe trim, again, some of that excess space on the right side, not too much. It needs space to move into, but there's just a hair, a little bit more maybe than it needs, but because it's not really adding to the scene, but just a nice sharp, I love the natural light and the detail on this picture. Nicely done. Next, please.
Okay, we're moving into the pictorial category. We'll begin with the 6s, starting with Blue Heron.
Okay. I love me some great blue herons. I think I've said that a couple of times. This solo figure, maybe a juvenile with that striping on the neck, is vertical in a plane of horizontals, which makes it stand out. So that's a real positive on the composition. Everything else is left to right, and oh, there's the bird that catches your eye. It's a 6 due to the uneven horizon. If it was intended, in my view, it doesn't work well with water, which to me should be level, and kind of leans the bird in a way that's not natural. I would also consider a softer background if possible for greater emphasis on the bird, or maybe crop in a bit, and to reduce the noise. When you zoom in, there's quite a bit of noise here, but it's that balance of the reflection in the water and the angle of the rocks. You've got a really nice natural composition there. Just give it a little tweaking and level it out and see if you like it better. Next, please.
Here is Fireworks.
All right. Scooting down to that one. Where I've got that one in here someplace. Here we go. Colorful fireworks, explosion, and the reflection here captures the busy boat scene, maybe Big Island or somewhere that's got a lot of activity. But there unfortunately are a lot of artifacts, maybe from motion, not sure. The fireworks are fairly sharp, but the boats, and maybe intentionally or not sure, are all kind of blurred with the water also. I'm not sure what the area of focus is, if it's the fireworks or the explosion or the reflection. And again, here, the water does not appear to be level. It's just maybe a hair off, or it might be the angle against the island. It's a little hard to tell, but there's a lot of editing artifacts and halos that need some attention along the horizon lines and the boats that can result from some of the steps taken to pop the color and contrast. So it is a 6, I'm sorry. Next, please.
Halloween.
Halloween colors abound in this shot. It's a nice sharp image that includes the nice framing of the colorful tree. That kind of gives it a very nice kind of top down to keep your eye toward the center of the picture. That was well used. Unfortunately, not quite sure which is the subject. The houses, the decorations, the house next door. There's a whole lot going on in this picture, particularly with the amount of detail of the leaves in the foreground and elements in the house and the two houses. And it kind of detracts. If the subject house is the main one here, there's still a lot going around where I'm not quite sure where you want me to really put my eye. It's far away enough not to be able to see all the yard decorations, so I lose a lot of that detail as well, or the glow just kind of obliterates some of the decorations and the wording and things that are there. So it's a little bit busy for me, and that's why it has a 6. Next, please.
Here is iconic Duluth landmark.
Again, the monochrome really relies on the tones, to illustrate the details in this iconic bridge. A lot of pictures of bridges, so there's something about it often that has to really make it stand out. I'm not sure the water is level. It's a little hard to tell with the bridge right at the horizon line, but if you look above the apartments on the right side, that horizon does not look level to me. And then I would, how to make your image stand out when it is something we see a lot. There are some, maybe I revisit this and see what you can do with it. There's a lot of smudginess in the water in the foreground, and a lot of maybe excess water, which is heavy weighting the photo at the bottom, rather than keeping us on the bridge area and the cross bridge in the middle. So see if we can take out some of that processing activity, level the picture, and see if it's not stronger to your eye. Next, please.
Tetaguchi.
Tetaguchi, Burr. What a scene at this park, post-storm. So much detail on those ice formations. And that's really the challenge here. It's a fairly pixelated image. When you get into it, it's not sharp. I don't know if it was tightly cropped, which then highlighted a lot of the bright pixels, but that fractures kind of the smoothness of the ice and on the trees. And the sky is actually, when you look at it closely, is very noisy, particularly in the cloud detail, which is why it is a 6, but it's a fun sight to see. It doesn't happen very often. Next, please.
Okay, we're getting to the 7s now, and we will start with Kara coming in.
This was like, wow, nice capture of a beautiful bird almost at a landing, or maybe it's taking off, can't quite tell. The color is very sweet. That nice soft green is a great balance with the browns and the warm tones of the bird. It's interesting but not distracting. It's the look on the bird's face that gets my attention. The bright yellow, of course, on the white neck, my eye goes right to that. And I'm not sure if what the open mouth statement is. It's like, oh, who put that sparrow on my perch? Or look out, I'm coming in. You could have some fun with what it might be expressing. It's a 7, given the face and the body feathers really aren't as sharp as it would be required to be to move it higher. And they need to be with this kind of a close-up. So great framing, nice cropping on it, but unfortunately it's not quite as sharp in the main body as it needs to be. Next, please.
Here is fall in Shenandoah Valley.
Ooh. Bright, bold study of colors and shapes and patterns in the fill frame color image. So that always poses the challenge, where is the eye to land? Is it the color bright band in the center, maybe, or is it the full scene is the entire subject? But given others in this category, I think it would score higher and rate higher with a focal point, and maybe that being moving a bit to the side if you have more, and make the red tree the place that stands out amongst the surrounding golds and oranges, or something about one in particular that highlights an area where you want me to look, because right now the banding is really it, and the pop red is sort of off to the right, where I almost miss it until I go around a couple times. And I think that's the point of contrast in the image. Next, please.
Here's geometry.
Let me scoot down there. There we go. Interesting angle of the Mississippi River locks. I think they had a day down there last year. We could come and photograph. I wish I had done that. Maybe this was shot then. Very sweet use of exposure. You know, a lot of nice kind of blacks that get a little bit muddy in places, but some gray tones and some brights on the buildings. I thought it got a little bit muddy in the blacks and uneven graininess in the gray tones. When you look more closely, it's pretty noisy and gray in the parts that need to have detail, but not noise, because that light is what's defying all the shapes here. It's not color, it's the contrast between the tones. So the black and white keeps the focus on those shapes and the connecting shadows, and not the materials and colors that could draw away from the image name. Next, please.
Here's Grand Marais.
It is indeed lovely. Grand Marais, very special place to many of us. That harbor can really be a challenge due to the placement of the elements, because of the gaps and where things land, and you can't put them always where you want them to be. I like the treatment of the color. It was certainly a interesting marriage of the purples and the blues, and it's not something you see up there all that often. But I think it would, while it is an odd number there, plus the moon, it's really hard to know where you want me to be. You've got the Yardis on the right, you've got the boat in the center, we've got the tower and the moon on the left, and the people. So I'm not sure, is it the ripples in the water? Is it the boat in the center? There's so much open space between those points of interest that the point of focus is a bit lost. The only way you can really alter that when you're up there is to move yourself to one of the sides and see if you can condense or make the elements closer together if you're trying to form a trio. But right now it's so very spread out with those two elements so tight to the side. It's not really clear where you want me to be. Next, please.
It's all happening.
Nice bright colors, another state fair scene. And again, the subject appears to be the whole entire scene, which I'm not sure if it's level, if it's the wide angle a little bit there, but sidewalk looks a little tipped. So I'm just bringing that up for the sake of like, oh, the tree is kind of in the middle, but it all leans right to a little bit there. But it kind of puts me a little bit off kilter. But where again am I to look? There's the booth, there's the people. I see a ride, I see a big garbage can, I see people's backs aren't always the most compelling subject. There's no interaction to capture as like something happening between these people here or there. So in a case where you have so many busy and competing elements, moving in or picking one or two would be more compelling for the image. Because right now it's kind of a snapshot, but it's a snapshot of a lot of things. And unfortunately, that trash can in the foreground and the color of it are like the first thing that I see. Next, please.
Lone Sentinel.
How lovely to witness this rainbow. Is that Acadia National Park? I have not been there, but I've seen this scene several times, and what a beautiful placement of the rainbow over the island or the shoreline there. The splash of light on the rocks is kind of nice too, but I gave it a 7 because again, I think the water is not level, and that's kind of an easy fix to alter that. And I would also revisit the contrast of the brightness. It's rather, I won't say dull colors, but the whites aren't really white. It's sort of matted look where there's less contrast than I think exists in the picture or the color balance. And also on the bottom left corner, there's a gull aiming off the screen. And there's a lot of chromatic aberration or fringing on it. You can see that and that red edging on it. So perhaps look at maybe cropping that rock and the gull out altogether, leveling it and brightening it. You'd have a beautiful picture of a lovely scene on a lovely shoreline. Next, please.
Okay, here's Mare and Colt.
Love the pastoral calm scene, very sweet. Nice use of light on the subject, kind of in the shadows there. Not too much, but it's a 7 due to what I again see as some processing issues in this category. There's kind of a smudgy look to the foal's legs in the background, but then the face is not. The mare's face is very sharp. The detail is there in the hair, so it's an uneven application of some processing things. And the way the grass is treated and the flowers, or however that was handled in post, it might almost fit in the creative category because it marries what looks to be some artistic rendering of the grasses with the realistic face of the animals. Next, please.
Here's Prairie, whoops,
No.
model surprised by photo bomber.
Yeah, this one, I spent some time with this one because, let me find my notes here. There we go. This made me smile. I said when I opened it, the title is Spot On, and the softness of the dog, which looks a lot like my dog, I got to tell you, kind of shows why. But I gave it the 7 because of the excessive space on the right. And I thought, okay, maybe that's the way the original picture was intended to be, with the baby in the center, and then in walks the dog. But because it's been shaped and edited for a Salon submission, that space on the right side is not, I don't know the context of why it's there. And so therefore I would have pulled that in and balanced the picture between the baby and the dog, because that space is not adding anything to the shot. Crop that, see if you like a little bit better, because you've chosen to submit it in this category. A little refinement like that would go a long way. But cute, 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 cute. Next, please.
Okay, here is Prairie Landscape.
All right, let me look down my. There were a lot in this category. Here we go. I stayed with this monochrome quite a bit. It appears to have been shot in some challenging light, maybe midday, given the shadow of the tree on the right side being so defined. But the kind of light is managed with the black and white toning here. And you've got a nice leading line. We haven't talked about that much tonight because a lot of the pictures have been kind of straight on. But this one, your eye follows that curve down and around, and you see it disappear in the background. So it's kind of rewarded with a couple of the nice sharp trees and the interesting clouds. The detail in the grass is kind of evened out pretty well with the black and white. But the more I looked at it, I thought it really lacks dimension. It's very even toned, even when you've got so many elements that have a lot of texture and shadows and shapes, and those are lost a bit in the evenness of the toning of the grass and the road are all kind of the same. So what I would suggest, if the photographer wishes, is to play around with some dodging and burning. Try to pull out some of the bright spots and darken the mid-tones and the darker colors. And all of a sudden, this thing will become a lot more interesting with more three-dimensional detail that I think is just waiting to be drawn out. There also, unfortunately, were at least 3 good-sized dust spots in the sky. And that falls under my category of dust spot removal and post-processing importance. And they're up in that really even tone, and you can see one there in the cloud as well. So easily removed with the dust spot or the spot removal tool, and not have to worry about that. Next, please.
Here is Summer Fishing.
But nice to be in this place. It seems very, very peaceful. I gave it a 7 due to the requirements of the category. Here, the colors are rather, they're very intense to be kind of realistic or natural, but mostly because it's very grainy, very noisy. Not just the things that are floating on the water, but there's very high noise in the water, and a bit more space below the borders would add some balance. Right now, when it's cropped right off on the bright white area, it's kind of missing a natural border, something that contains your eye to stay in the photo. Right now, it kind of falls off the bottom with that white water. Next, please.
Here's Sunrise.
Wish I was on that boat. Nice level silhouette picture. with a sweet bright sun, the spectral light. There's no pixels on that, and that is natural, and that's okay. I've seen waters that color, but I'm suspecting, I could be wrong, but I'm suspecting that the sky colors has been kicked up a notch or two to make it quite a bit hotter. And my main issue was a little bit with the balance of the picture, which is, again, the boat is level, it seems straight, but there is, I won't say rule of thirds, but at the top, the mast is very tight to the top, and there's a little bit excess water on the bottom, unless the goal was to show the reflections so much. I'd add a little bit more at the top and less at the bottom to give a better weight to the picture. And there you have it. Next, please.
Here is White House demonstration.
So the title tells us right where we are. Stood on that point many times. There's a lot happening, the barrier walls, and there's a new fence there, and it's, you've kind of captured that distance between the people in the foreground and the building in the back. But it had a bit of mixed messages for me. The black and white definitely adds a starkness to the shot, which suits the subject and really strips the color to emphasize the important message of the protesters. But those messages are cropped off a bit. You don't really see as much of what the reason they're there, except for one or two signs. What's not visible is the scale of the event that tells me what's happening, or even you've named it White House, but we're missing the flag. We're missing some of the elements to say, oh, that's to know where it's taking place, to build the context for the purpose of the picture. So is the focus on the building, which is in this case on the fence taking up almost 3/4, or is it the fence, which is at mid-level, or is it the small group, which is all looking away to the side? We're not sure what's happening. So I think because it tells the story in such a tight frame, that the story is a little bit lost. Is it the subject? Is it the people? How large is the scale? What's happening? It's only giving me a sliver of the story. Next, please.
Okay, moving on to the eights. We will start with Capitol, brought
Nice.
to us by
Oh,
Mike Waterman.
Sorry about that.
Sorry.
Nice view of the Capitol from what I think is the Supreme Court building. Nice framing of the Capitol, which you can see, thank goodness, when the leaves are off the tree. Oftentimes it's obscured by the trees. So that reveals the Capitol's beauty. It's nicely balanced. There's pretty even exposure in what appears to have been a bright day, and it was taken from a shady place. So it was a nice lifting of those shadows, and it's sharp kind of forward and backward. I don't know if it was an exposure blend or just a nice wide angle open or small aperture camera, but so all points are nicely featured. Next, please.
Here is Exhausted Lumberjack from Fred Savatka.
Not a picture. I opened it up and went, whoa. It was an interesting subject, well captured. I thought there's ample emotions and feelings on display here, which fits the pictorial catalog. There's a story, it's illustrated through the actions and the moment in time that he captured. There's a lot of power in this shot of frozen action, the muscles, the sweat falling, the hair askew. It's sharp throughout. The plain background serves as a real nice blank canvas. My only issue is with the tight cropping. And if it was done to show a sense of urgency, I find, to me, it really cramped the action, because it takes his hair off the top of his head. So if there was any more to add at the left bottom and the top, this thing would really sing. Interesting picture. Next, please.
Here is Loch Culin. I hope I said that right.
Yeah. I like the
J. Olson Goody. Sorry.
No, pardon me. A very moody image of a beautiful place. I hope to go there someday. I like the light. It captures the feeling that, again, the pictorial category is intended to showcase. It uses that foreground stream to really pull you right into the image, even though it's right down the middle. It's balanced with the color and the textures on either side and how the hillsides rise. So I thought that worked fine. It dances a little bit on losing detail in the blacks. So maybe lift the shadows, even though it's dark and moody. There's some detail in those shadows that I would want to see. And my only thing that I'm not in control of, but I think it would be a stronger image if the photographer moved a couple feet to either side and just see if you could still get some of that stream detail, and then maybe a little bit more of that lake and the angles. But again, I think it's just a lovely landscape of and captures the gray, moody feeling that I believe the photographer intended. Next, please.
Okay, here is Pruder and Sons by J. Olson Goody.
Another kind of fresh photo subject. I like the sweet light on this, the door, the rusty door, and the leaves, and particularly on the right side. It's really soft light, and the dark background, it serves as just a natural frame for the details of the plant and the rust. It's really kind of a tough balance between reducing the shadows on some parts where I would want a little bit more contrast. The detail on the door, for example, that Lake City gets a bit lost. I think a touch of contrast or clarity over that part would really pop the details on that rust and let us be able to read that sign even better. And then my final comment why it didn't go higher is that the space on the left is really, really tight, and that it feels really jammed up on the left side, where all that plant on the right offers some balance. It's very truncated on the left side. That's not felt in the rest of the image, which is very restful. So if there's a little bit more space to add, I would add it. Next, please.
Here is Unfinished Web by Ginny Gaynor.
An interesting image of an interesting web. It's not your typical perfect, every ring not blemished and broken beads. It's a very geometric kind of shape. Unfortunately, not a lot of it is sharp, and whether it was selective focus, the beads at the top section are sharp in the center part, but not the rest. So more is soft than sharp for the eye to search for and settle on. And clearly the crop was very intentional because that's how the image was submitted to the salon. But since so much of it is not part of the subject, which to me is the name of the picture, which is the web, I think it would be stronger if we're brought more into the web so we can see that beautiful detail, given that it's so far away. It's really tough to just spot the beautiful glistening on those beads in the middle. And we wouldn't have to search so much for like, where do you want me to look? That dark weed in the middle isn't really contributing anything, and the stems at the bottom. So I think a big judicious crop of the lower third, or almost quite half, would really showcase the title of the picture, which is that lovely unfinished web. Next, please.
Okay, we go to the nines, and we're going to start with Green Crowned Brilliant by Marianne Jerks.
I gotta zoom up to that. There's a lot in this category. Let me find there we go. No question about the subject here, all sharp and beauty and bloom connecting. The crop is great. There's enough on both sides to be really well balanced. In this case, the wing action is frozen, but because of the nature of the kind of shot, that frozen flash, I'm guessing, that's just going to be the case. And then it shows all the detail on the wing that balances all that super fine detail on the bird. I really love how the bloom opens to the bird, basically saying lunch is here. My only suggestion, if it could be done, would be to tone down the bright highlights from the flash on the petals. That solid pink is really very bright, which then takes me right from the bird to these bright pink petals. So they compete a bit. So if it were possible to tone down the highlights or brush in some shadowing or something on those two bright pink petals, there would be more energy spent on the bird. But great balance. I love the angles, and the connection between the bird and the petals is really, really sweet. Lovely image. Next, please.
Next is Montana Sunrise by Mike Waterman.
Another lovely mood image. It definitely engenders emotions, which is what this pictorial category is designed to do. The calming blues, it's nice and wide. I think the crop is sweet. And it's not over processed to make the pink scream in the sky, or sometimes you see pictures like this and they're just given so much kick that's like, really? Was it? It takes away from the nice natural experience that you have. You feel like you're sitting on the dock with these two people. And it also yields no goofy artifacts. There's no halos or anything from over processing. You let the picture present itself. At least that's how it appears to me. And I think that's really lovely. It's clean, it's natural, it's peaceful. It shows the isolation in their setting. You could perhaps lose a little bit of the dock at the bottom, but that's being a little bit picky. But that would take some of the emphasis off the dock and put a little bit more on the people in the sky. But really lovely, nice, natural image. Next, please.
Wachipi Powwow Participant by Mick Richards.
Again, that pictorial piece, it's a strong composition, very compelling image, makes it a 9 here. The bright face gets the eye first, and all points aim to and from it with those feathers and the orange braids. I mean, everything brings you right to that center where you want me to look. The softer background gives context. We know that there's people there, but it doesn't detract from what's happening with the dancer. Many fine bead and feather details. The colors look very true as they need to be to tell the story. I gave it a 9 because the face and the beads and the features they're sharp, probably acceptably sharp, but they're not quite as sharp when you zoom in to really, really, really make it sing. So I wish they were a little bit, but sharpening software might take care of that. So if you could pop that, this would tell your story even more so than you do now. But great positioning in the frame, great cropping to show us enough of what's there without having to show the whole sky and all the surrounds with it. So beautiful image. Next, please.
Okay, and finally the 10s. Here is Focused Conductor by Fred Savatka.
This a special moment, well captured, well composed image. There is a real story here, which is what the pictorial category is calling for. There's great use of the dark background. It's balanced with the available and colorful stage lights, those pinks, those blues, the casting on the skin from the reflections and the glow around the hair, the selective focus on the conductor, who's clearly intent on what she's doing. Eyes are closed, she's in the moment. The students are looking at her. I mean, I think, and the angle of all those heads and the materials pointing toward her. I mean, there's no question what's happening here, and the story is here. The action is frozen, the subject, great centering and balanced. All the attention, the students and our own, is on the subject. That's nice and sharp. Well done. Cool picture. Next, please.
Okay, that is the end of our October salon. Thank you again, Deanne, for your
Make sure I
thoughtful
know that you've got them
commentary.
all, Jill. Yep, I think that
Okay.
was, no, there's one more. There's a 10, one more. Oh, no,
Uh-oh.
forgive me. That's scamming me up. Pardon me, my mistake. Different category. So sorry. I'm looking at a spreadsheet. Sorry
Okay,
about that.
that's okay. Thanks again for your thoughtful commentary. We really appreciate it. And thank you to everyone for participating.
Yeah, thank you, Deanne. This was very good.
You're welcome.
Very
Thank
helpful.
you. Thank you.
I'm gonna shut it down. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you, Deanna.